Ballpark Nation presents. Welcome to Go Astros, your look at the two-time World Series champions from three guys who have been here since Art Howe had hair.
And welcome everybody to Ballpark Nation. I'm coming to you from, like about a half a mile from the Astros, maybe two of the best wins of the season. Now sharing the New York State with me is Brian Arbor, and right back down home in Houston, Texas is Andy. Brian, let's talk, man. Really two very different kinds of wins, but the two types of wins that you wouldn't have seen a month and a half ago.
No, these are the games they did not win in April. They got down and lost, or they got in close games, and something happened that went against them. And they're not going to get credit for a one-run win yesterday because they exploded in the 11th. But, those are the kind of games they were losing. And I don't know if you noticed this. The offense has gotten really good. They're hitting well.
Yeah, Andy, the offense has gotten really good, and like everything else with it, it's not even really complete because in many ways, arguably the best bat hasn't been there for like a month and a half with a bruised shin, but whatever.
Yeah, June 3rd. He last played June 3rd, so it will be a month on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Today's the 1st. It's interesting, and they're getting contributions from the guys you would expect for the last 30 days, Alvarez, Altuve, and to some extent, the Yainer Diaz, not to some extent, they've been hitting really well, but you're also getting contributions from guys like Trey Cabbage. Mm-hmm. And I want to give a special shout out to Trey Cabbage because he is just another indictment that the Angels organization simply doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to developing players, because the Astros have had their hooks in him for 4 months, and all of a sudden he's able to be a competent major leaguer. Power's not there. He still strikes out too much, but he's also batting .286 on the season in the last 30 days, .314 with a .514 slugging. I think he's given up trying to be a power hitter, or at least it's not there yet, but he's hitting doubles, making contact. And there's that kind of contribution almost up and down the lineup right now, which is what you have when the offense is going well. You've got contributions from all 9 guys.
Yeah, and I'd like to remind everybody that I was really high on Trey Cabbage from the minute he was signed. Thought he should have broke camp with the team. But
hey, somebody was like, hey, they're going to sign this guy.
Yeah,
that's true. DFA'd him because I knew it was for inexplicable reasons, as Andy said. So
yeah, literally
on that earlier than anybody in the Astros fandom. So you're not stealing this one from me, James.
Okay, well that's all right. That's fair. I'm not even going to try to break it down. But no, it's been fun. Quietly, the Astros were the best team in June. And I think you had it broken down on one of your Substacks, Brian, that really since May, this has been the team we've expected.
Yeah, they went they've now gone, I think it was 16-11, both the second half, and divided the season up into 6. And they went 16-11, which is like a 96 win pace in both the second and third 6 of the season. So if they continue that out through the rest of the season, they'd end up with 88 wins, which is at the cusp of playoff contention. What the hope is that, we're going to get what we've seen in June, where, again, adding a couple more games to that and they play better, where they're going to, get to like 90 games and definitely make the playoffs. And, in playoffs, anything can happen. And this is a team with some, strengths in the playoffs that would be useful if they can get there. But hey, that's the big thing. But hey, every time they win, particularly, these games they shouldn't win, like the last 2 games, where you can find lots of reasons why they could have lost them. It only really sort of adds to their playoff chances.
Andy, one thing though that's missing in Brian's calculation and all of that is that Seattle is playing really awful baseball, and part of that is they have a real offensive issue that has really been an issue all season that has kept the Astros in it. And I mean, we could talk about 88 win pace, but you're also only 3 games back from the Seattle Mariners, considering you're on an 88 game pace. I mean, that tells you that everything you really want is right in front of you still.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, if you're in Seattle this morning, or you're even in Arlington, you've got to lament that you didn't bury the Astros when you had the chance. And in all honesty, a 7-19 start should have buried the Astros.
Sure.
And in a more competitive division, it probably would have. But you're now in a realistic spot where, and I hate to say it, but Dana Brown might be right. This team was good enough, and they will be buyers, and all those things that we were kind of snickering at a couple of weeks ago. They're in the heat of the wild card race, and more importantly, the division race. So it's a team that has started to gel, peak, whatever adjustment needed to happen during that month of April that didn't happen, started in May, has really took fire in June. If it continues, this is a playoff team. And this is a team that nobody will want to deal with. And I know the Yankees fans that I engage with on Twitter are not thrilled about the Astros showing signs of life, because it's just this cloud that hangs over them, which is just a really fun, interesting thing to talk about with them, because they're really positive and always see the best in things. Emily.
Yeah, I'm about to say, yeah, definitely. Emily,
we spent years with, really from when I started becoming Astros fans in the 1980s to the end of the Bagwell Biggio era, with no one in the rest of baseball having any emotion about the Astros.
One way or the other.
Yeah. It's good to be hated.
It's much better to be hated. A couple of interesting things happened over this series, though, I wanted your take on, and that was Espada getting ejected, but really Altuve's ejection yesterday. And I kind of want to take them kind of as one, because they're showing a little bit more. It's what Astros Twitter wants to see, right? They're showing some fire and some spit. But yesterday's Altuve injection in particular was pretty asinine, and I'm not sure how that's not a reviewable play. But just overall, Andy, like when you see this happen, do you have a reaction one way or the other when you see Espada getting tossed? Or, I mean, you're really taking up for Jake Myers in that situation, because he did get screwed over in 2 at-bats.
I mean, I think what we're seeing is the evolution with Joe Espada of what kind of manager he wants to be. That first month, I think it's hard, and I know Astros fan base, when you're losing, you want to see that spark, see the fire, see the hustle face, whatever it is that makes you think they're trying. Espada wasn't doing it, and he has a lot of critics online because he didn't look like he cared. But it's also a guy thrust into a new job that he really wanted, but didn't have a lot of experience doing. And so it's learning your role, learning your pace, not necessarily wanting to be the hothead and be the guy that, is even keel and all those kind of fun things. But at some point you do realize that there are times and moments where you do need to step up for your team. You do need to speak up to the umpires. You do need to risk an ejection when the strike zone is all over the place. And I think he's learning how to be that guy. So I don't expect that he's going to become Hal Lanier or anything where he starts setting a record for getting.
Please no. Yeah.
But I also think that he's learning the job on the job. So what you saw in March and April isn't necessarily what you're seeing in June, and isn't necessarily the manager you're going to see in September. We don't have patience, though, because it's 2024, and why would we, about letting people grow into roles and being, evolving over time. So I think that's what you're seeing with him. I think it's also important. I don't think it's important that Jose Altuve gets thrown out of a game, but I think that Major League umpires are, as a whole, really, really bad this year. And I think worse than they've been in a while. And I know that's anecdotal, and I can feel Brian tense up when I say things like that, because I'm sure there's some stat that says, nope, they're exactly as bad as they've always been. And that's probably true. But the Astros feel like they have suffered a lot at the hands of the umpires this year, whether it is strike zones or weird calls that can't be reviewable, or balls that, hit feet, but, or don't hit anybody, but bounce, defying the laws of physics, back onto the field of play. Altuve's pissed, and Altuve's frustrated. Altuve's also trying to chase 159 hits a year for the next few to reach a milestone. He's at 103 right now. So, not a lot of harm done, but he missed a couple at bats because of extra innings yesterday.
Yeah, Brian. To me, it seemed pretty clear. I don't know. It was funny watching his Altuve after the game, because you could tell he was still really pissed off about it. Mm-hmm. And he would just sort of smile when he said, He said something like home plate umpire didn't see it, but there's a catcher in front of him. I don't know what third base umpire was looking at or something to that effect. It just seemed like an especially horrifyingly bad call.
It was. You get why it happens, because that's really hard for the home plate umpire to see. And it's predominantly his call. So that's, and then sometimes they're trying to actually listen for it. They may hear it. And, if you look, Altuve's foot is a little bit off his toe is a little bit off the ground. So maybe it didn't make a big sound or whatever, but there's this really nice angle down the left field, from the left field line, where you see the third base umpire
and crew chief. That was the crew chief,
and the ball hitting and changing direction. So nobody saw it. That happens. They probably weren't, looking for it the way that they should have. That's, some of that's just, it's frustrating. It's understandable. You can't throw your equipment like that. That's an automatic ejection. He actually got ejected twice because 2 umpires threw him out. There is an umpire fantasy league, and there is controversy on who gets credit for it.
That's not.
I thought it was really, really weird that Governor Connolly was hit by the ball, which seemed to float in midair. I'm waiting for the Earl Inspector report to come out, though, and tell me exactly what happened.
I'm waiting for the Oliver Stone film, and I'm going to be in it, and I'm just going to talk like this, like John Candy does, baby doll. Well, that's a deep dive, you guys. We just did a JFK film reference.
If you'd like me to turn this into real life, if you ever wondered why he's Harry Connick Jr., it's because the guy replaced the guy who was actually a crazy conspiracy theorist as a district attorney with someone saying it was Harry Connick Sr. So Junior needed to be Junior to differentiate him from his, at least in town, well-known dad.
Wow. You see, I feel like we need that the more you know thing.
Yeah.
It turns out the whole thing was Roger McDowell. He was the second spitter.
Nice game, pretty boy. That now props to Mets fans. I think I saw like 4 of that T-shirt yesterday at the game. No, the Mets, I was at the game yesterday. And it was a great time. I'm sure any of the Astros fans who've been to Citi Field, it was fun because I've noticed this. I noticed it at the White Sox game. I'm sure I'll see it this weekend when I'm at 2 of the Twins games. We're really becoming a fan base that does travel well, that does represent. And there was a lot of really just good vibes between both Mets fans and Astros fans yesterday. I think both teams coming in, the hottest teams in baseball, I think added a little something to the series. But it really was a lot of fun. My experience in Philly says don't go to a Phillies road game if you're an Astros fan because, oh, my God, it's so Philly. But the elephant in the room is Framber Valdez. Andy, I'm going to start with you on this because – this has been a conversation you and I have been having for 7 years now. What is going on with this guy?
I mean, it's the same story I think we've been talking about for the last 2 seasons, especially. From a emotional standpoint, he doesn't deal well with any kind of adversity at all. From a performance standpoint, he gets in situations where he thinks his fastball is better than it is and messes up all the rest of his pitches because he overthrows. And then from a fielding standpoint, he needs a designated fielder. Sometimes you see this like in coach pitch where there's just a guy pitching and somebody else fielding the ball. If you could just set up a baseball game where he never has to touch the ball outside of throwing it to a catcher, he'd be fine. The issue is that he thinks he's Brooks Robinson and he's not. And so it's a lot of rumbling, mumbling, stumbling off the mound and just launching the ball. I mean, it's like a little baby hippo. It's just I'm going to pick up this ball and launch it towards the dugout and hope there's somebody who can catch it.
Yeah.
And it happens a couple of times a season, and it's just mind-boggling how bad he is.
Yeah, he needs to just field the ball and then hold it and just be okay with that guy getting it first. Brian?
I was traveling on Saturday. I didn't watch the game live. I watched the highlights afterwards, the MLB condensed game, and they had the Mets broadcast on. And Gary Cohen, Mets play-by-play guy who's excellent, you can tell in his voice, he is just incredulous. He cannot believe that Framber Valdez has tried this throw towards home plate right at the moment. He's just, has this literal moment of shock that comes from the broadcast. So, which doesn't show up on Robert Ford's call because, well, he's seen Fromber field many more times than Gary Cohen. So, no Astros play-by-play person would be, at that level.
Robert gets excited if the throw's actually completed. He's like, whoa.
Yeah. Fromber's biggest issue this year, if we get to, like his actual sort of performance, pitching the ball, which, we can survive Fromber's fielding if he pitches well. His strikeout rate is down significantly. In his career, he struck out.
Before you finish answering, it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, though, but this really feels like second half of this now feels like a full season of this.
Yeah. And, a career strikeout rate is 23%. This season, it's 19.3. Wow. So he's striking out 4% fewer batters. That's more balls in play. His walk rate is, slightly elevated, but most because it was down last year. But the biggest issue is he's not striking guys out. And he's always going to be a little bit wild. He doesn't have literally control of his pitches, right? But his ability to get strikeouts out of his ability to get double plays compensates for the fact he's going to give up a few more walks than you like, and that he's going to have these sort of moments. That's Fromber at his best. That he's able to quickly get out of these situations and not have them spiral. Sometimes they spiral, and sometimes, the ball gets hit to him, and, it's adventures in that. But the biggest issue with Fromber this year is many fewer strikeouts. And, as you say, James, it's kind of what we saw in the second half of last season, minus the no-hitter.
One of the things that, and I hate it how Astros Twitter eats itself, because there are valid conversations to be had. And a friend of our show suggested on Twitter yesterday that it might be time to see about trading Fromber and seeing what you can get from him. And I'm not so against this idea, because I think you're going to find somebody that's going to be able to feel like they can do something with him. I feel like clearly there's the conversation isn't connecting anymore here in Houston is what it feels like. But also, this Astros offense is so good. Just give us average. If you can just give us average, then you might win some games. When his ERA is like 4.20, and his ability to just melt down and give up a game at any moment. We've already seen it twice this year where it's been, 5 runs. Before you look up, 5 runs have been given up. Andy, where do you fall on that debate?
It's going to sound like I'm making this up, but I have been willing, and you can vouch for me, willing to trade Fromber Valdez for the last couple of years. And yes, he had a fantastic 2024 or 22. And was every one of the reasons that we won the World Series that year. However, nothing has really changed, and he's actually regressed in some areas as far as the things that bother me about Fromber Valdez. So if you could get prospects for him, now I'm not ready to trade him today, because the Astros, as we sit, have 4 healthy starters in their 40-man roster. So there's not like there's an option that we can just plug in and even hope to get average right now. There is nobody. So this would be something that would have to be part of a series of moves where you're netting basically 2 starters from other organizations, or somebody gets really, really healthy soon. I guess Jake Bloss is the next one up from the health standpoint, because he's looks like he could come back against the Twins, according to what McTaggart said over the weekend. But if the starting situation starts righting itself and Verlander comes back and you start getting a real timeline on Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers, I would take
Garcia is supposed to be starting a rehab assignment soon, is what I understand.
Garcia started it on Friday.
Yeah, he started it, and he's pitching in Corpus this week. So, but they're still 30 days out. They don't have to make a move on him till almost right before the end of the month. I don't remember the exact timeline. But as we sit right now, the Astros cannot afford to trade Fromber Valdez, because they can't afford to lose another starter. There is nobody else. In a couple of weeks, maybe after the All-Star break, I think that's a conversation that has to be had while his value is still relatively high. And you hope you can get a first baseman or a bat or something else that Dana Brown thinks the team needs, or even prospects that can develop. That might be the better deal for him. But I can't see the Astros investing long-term in an extension. And if they know that now, it'd be better to trade him for a team that thinks they can fix him.
Brian, do you have a similar view, or do you think we're crazy?
It's something you consider, I think, in the offseason, because at this moment, sort of Andy said, yeah, you could have Jake Bloss back next week. I'm not – don't want to replace Fromber in the rotation with Jake Bloss, and then I'll get you to 5. You could have Verlander back sometime maybe soon, though that seems a bit – you could have Garcia and McCullers back later in the season. I guess Garcia would be back by the end of the month, now that we're in July, and McCullers will be back sometime in August. But do you trust those guys just off Tommy John surgery?
No, I trust Garcia probably, but I don't trust McCullers.
Yeah, and my trust in Garcia is like I haven't seen him not come back easily from an injury before, since this is his first one. We've got lots of experience with McCullers on, if he pitches, he's fine, but he's a Ferrari, he's a Ferrari or a Fiat. He's in the shop too often.
He's a Fiat.
I like that. That's good.
Shout out to our Italian listeners.
Yeah, I'm sure we have one.
Yeah. So it's a problem because they lack alternatives right now. Should they consider that in the off season? Probably. They also can more easily find a replacement for Fromber. It also depends on sort of what the market is. And what they sort of want out of that. And there's another off-season conversation about what they do with payroll next year.
Right.
Which is, again, an off-season conversation, because right now the conversation is, are they going to continue to play well enough in July to be buyers? Which I think, we've already sort of touched on. I think that's the most likely scenario. I'm not sure Jim Crane wants to give up on this season, even if they do go into a skid sometime soon. But again, later conversation. Right now on Fromber, they kind of got to go with him, and they kind of got to get him fixed. And getting more strikeouts would be really, really helpful.
Okay, so now that we are in July, it's one of the favorite things to talk about in July is whether or not your players should participate in the home run derby. We'll get to that at some point later on maybe next week. But also, you start to look at trade deadline stuff, and I'm of the opinion that the Astros should either go big and really try to win, or do a light sell. I don't want to see an offseason where there's really nothing, because I think that this team has enough pieces. I don't know that this team wins the World Series now, because you also got to factor in other teams getting better as well. So I'm of the opinion that they should buy. Brian, am I wrong? I mean, do you think it's okay to kind of have just a sort of mediocre trade deadline and be okay?
I think the biggest thing that affects that is their projection on what's going to happen with, again, Garcia and McCullers. Because if those guys come back and are effective rotation pieces, you don't necessarily need to get a starting pitcher. If they come back and they're really sort of, cold struggling to walk, because, they've been so injured and been away from so long, then you do need a starting pitcher. And that seems to be a hard evaluation, right? Can you really tell a lot from Luis Garcia and what he does in Corpus Christi? And of course, you're trying to project what he's going to be like 2 months from now.
Yeah.
Presumably he'll be a little bit better, just because, muscle memory will be better, and, he'll be back to sort of in his routine, where nothing for him is routine right now, particularly noted by the fact that he pitched, one game in West Palm Beach, and his next game is going to be in Corpus Christi, right? So that's a tough evaluation, but the most important evaluation. The other big question about the trade deadline is, how much luxury tax is Jim Crane willing to pay? You're obviously above the luxury tax threshold, which is, what they went with Josh Hader. And so it's a question of sort of how much salary they want to add, because it's the easiest way to acquire, particularly if you just want a mid-level starting pitcher who will eat innings for you and can throw 4 or 5 innings in game 3 of a series and turn things over to your bullpen. those starters, those pitchers are out there because teams that aren't in the playoffs are willing to give them to you so they don't have to pay them.
Yeah.
They cost relatively little in terms of prospects, but it's unclear to me, again, because this is, Jim Crane's never paid this much in salary. He's never paid this as much in luxury tax. Does he want to go up? Don't know. Don't have anything to judge that on. And that's an ownership level question that'll affect the decisions that Dana Brown makes.
Andy, we'll start with you on this then. The big rumor going around is there's a certain percentage of talking heads and Astros fans that want to go in for Vlad Guerrero Jr. And part of me wonders, are you just attracted to a name because his numbers, and I know Brian will round it out with the numbers on that, don't feel like that's much of an improvement over what they have at first base now? Your thoughts?
I would guess that people would hope that, the proverbial change of scenery trade would reignite Guerrero and he'd be in a playoff run and all that kind of stuff that he really hasn't got to experience in Toronto because they've had moments of success, but certainly not the team they thought they were going to have over the last couple of years. Because I know even on this show, we've always expected Toronto to be better than they have been.
I've picked them to lose to the Astros in the ALCS for the last 3 years in a row.
And it just hasn't panned out. Pitching failed them. The hitters haven't been what they thought they were. George Springer signing while bringing that leadership hasn't really produced on-field results. So there's been a lot of issues there. And I think it's literally just I know his name, and if we put him in a better situation, he's going to play better. Maybe that happens. But the cost for that guy relative to performance is going to be extremely high. And the Astros, I still struggle to see where they have the bullets to make that kind of deal. Yeah. Now, we probably would have sat here and said that last year about Justin Verlander and reacquiring him, but Mets were willing to eat a bunch of salary, and we made that work out and had to give up 2 of our top 3 prospects in the organization. I don't know that the Astros can continue to do that. Now, having said that, our top 3 prospects aren't great. I know there's some people that are watching there, you get really mad that I said that, but it's not like we have a bunch of top 100 prospects sitting there waiting to be taken. We've got work to do in the minors. That's
and it seems like our best prospects right now are the guys Dana Brown drafted last year that are moving through the lower minors, but are not.
Yeah.
And they're moving up, and I think Brown's doing a great job of promoting guys and clearing out some of the chafe that's been occupying Corpus and Sugarland for the past couple of seasons. But I think it's going to be hard to find a trade partner that makes sense for the Astros, especially something as big as a Vladimir Guerrero type. I think there are better options. I still don't understand why we don't play Trey Cabbage more at first because he has that skill set. We seem to be stuck on Singleton versus and Dubon at that position, and that's again Joe Espada's choice. But it's a really interesting. It's going to be an interesting trade market. I think the Astros do need to make moves. I don't know if they need to be big moves, but you'd like to have some consistent offense out of first base. You'd like to have, and I disagree with Brian. I think you've got to pick up one more starting pitcher because Verlander hasn't started throwing and hasn't thrown a baseball since the Wednesday before he scratched the start. He's on a no-throw regimen right now. He's not traveling with the team. I don't want to start the whole Verlander doesn't support his team conversation. That was a fun time in 2020. But it's concerning. I don't know when he's coming back. He doesn't know when he's coming back, and it's something nondescript and minor that could linger. I know when I was 41, those things happened and stayed for a while. So I just don't see them getting through the year with Jake Bloss taking a bunch of turns and Hunter Brown going up against an innings limit and Rono Blanco going up against an innings limit. In limit's probably the wrong word, but just they haven't thrown that many innings in their career up to this point, and at some point there's a drop off.
Eric Denny's in that boat too.
So I think you need not this guy because he's sucked this year, but a Jordan Montgomery type that you can pick up who has a reasonable chance of pitching 5 innings every game. I don't see that in the Astros organization right now, but I do expect them to be buyers over the next month.
Hey, Brian, what about you with the whole Vlad Guerrero Jr. thing and then also sort of rebutting what Andy said?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I think, the Blue Jays had made noises that they're not going to trade Guerrero and Bo Bichette, who are also
Yeah, but A&M's baseball coach is staying. So
do with that what you will. They're more likely to trade. They're more likely to trade some other guys. But it's also a question for the Blue Jays of, are they contenders in 2025, or do they want to tear everything down? And I'm not sure they want to tear everything down. Again, so that's a question. That's a question for Go Blue Jays. But we need to sort of be aware of that. Vlad's having a better year than we think, because his sort of reputation is he's supposed to be finished second in the MVP a couple of years ago. He's supposed to be that level, and he was real young and ascend. He's on this season, 297 batting average, 375 on base, 471 slugging, 13 homers, which isn't great, but again, but still quite good. 141 OPS plus. So, hey, that's better than John Singleton. That's better than Mauricio Dubon, even as sort of the platoon hitter. So there is value to that. Defensively, it's an issue. But again,
Jose Abreu level defense, right?
No, but that's because Jose Abreu collapsed in every sort of element of his thing. But it's there are some measures that show him to be a neutral fielder, and some that say don't. So with defensive metrics, there's sort of a bit to look at here. The bigger question is the one we've already touched on, and that Andy and I have gone back and forth on. Right? Is the priority pitching, or is the priority first base? And, obviously the biggest argument, the question in some ways is, what are the alternatives? Is the alternative first base to play Trey Cabbage more? That may work out because he's looked pretty good so far. Is the alternative pitcher relying on McCullers and Garcia to come back and be what we've seen from them previously? Again, this is why being a general manager is a hard job, because, again, you have to make these decisions based on, hey, what's Luis Garcia showing me at Corpus Christi? And what does Luis Garcia on rehab assignment, how do I project that out for 2 months from now? It's a hard job.
If the Cardinals end up falling back, maybe I'll finally get my Paul Goldschmidt wish. No?
Yeah, the problem with that is Goldschmidt is almost as bad as Jose Abreu.
No. I know. Boy, he would have been so good a couple of years ago. All right, guys. Well, we're just about out of time. Brian, any parting thoughts? Any last words on the weekend that was and the week coming up? Because it looks like this should be a pretty successful road trip by the time they get back.
He absolutely beat one person we haven't mentioned today, who I think played a big role yesterday and really helpful on Saturday. The win is Taylor Scott, who is a big contributor in the bullpen. And yesterday pitched third straight game in a row and gave us two innings without an earned run. Gave up the place runner, two base runners in those innings. And Taylor Scott's been a real find this season. So that's a compliment to Dana Brown and to the player development staff for making that work. And thank goodness.
Well, also,
it's a compliment. It's a compliment to this show too, because we've all said that bullpens are crapshoots. So just pick up some damn arms; it'll work out.
Yeah,
and that's.
Well, even notwithstanding Seth Martinez having a rare bad outing and Brian Abreu suffering from Dusty syndrome and that he hadn't thrown in 3 or 4 days and was rusty.
But the one time all season he hasn't pitched. He wasn't overtaxed walking onto the mound.
Yeah. But the bullpen really has what we thought could have been a potential weakness for this team has really, really been pretty impressive. Again, especially yesterday when they covered 11 innings and got a win. Andy, last thoughts?
Just, I guess, go Canada, since it's Canada Day, which is why we're playing a game at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Monday. But I'll take it because it's better than paying attention to work.
Yeah.
You'd like to see them win 3 of these next 4 against a somewhat reeling Blue Jays team and then go into Minnesota continuing to be hot. So go Stros. Yeah,
I'll be at 2 of those Minnesota games. So if you're there, come and say hello. If you're a member of Go Twins, come and say hello. I think I would have been content with a 6-4 road trip. It looks like 7-3 feels really, really within the realm of possibility. So looking forward to that. We will be back next week Go Astros.